is by collecting funds from foreign governments or oligarchs, compromised people, in exchange for favors to be made later. This of course affects the American people. And it happens to be that a lot of their business has been in China and in Ukraine and other places where we have every right to know exactly what was traded, exactly what was going on, and how it has affected American lives.
Mr. Chairman, so she's laid out that this is pretty extensive within the greater Biden family. Are you going to be issuing subpoenas on all those various members, people that, and can you compel them, can you force them to testify?
We're going to do whatever it takes to get the truth. We're starting with everyone that was involved in the Hunter Biden influence peddling scheme. I'm pleased to report we communicated with 4 of those people this week, either directly with the individual or with their attorneys. So we are making progress. I've just been chairman of the committee for 5 weeks, and we've already made contact, and I'm pleased to say are getting some cooperation from some of the people involved in the influence peddling.
Molly, let's stay on that theme for just a little bit. Everyone's going to laugh at this, I know they are. When Joe Biden was campaigning, he said that he never talked to Hunter Biden about any of this China business. We find that curious now, and especially a guy named Tony Bobolinsky, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He kind of blew the whistle on that. But we haven't seen much of Bobolinsky since then. Are we going to see him again? Should we see him again?
Well, if we could just revisit this too. We had from the 2015 to the current moment an absolute paranoid conspiracy theory that the Trump family had engaged with Russia and had stolen the 2016 election. This was a widely held conspiracy theory. And if you recall, the Trump family actually was engaged in global business, like legitimate global business. It would not have been that crazy if it had involvement with Russian interests. Then you have the Biden family, which has no legitimate business interests in all these foreign countries. You have Joe Biden saying, not just that he never talked to Hunter about China, but he never talked about his China business, but that he never talked about the Hunter Biden business at all. You had an eyewitness account, Tony Bobolinsky, saying, that's not true because I personally spoke with Joe Biden about this. You have all sorts of other evidence as well. You have meetings between Hunter Biden affiliates in Ukraine with Joe Biden during the vice presidency. You also have interesting stuff coming out with the classified documents scandal. So the classified documents, which in Joe Biden's case, this scandal going back to his time as a senator, involve a lot of things that almost read like they would be bulletins of interest to someone who is trying to do a pay-for-play type operation. So all of these things are really important. I also want to say, the reason why this investigation is so important is that the Department of Justice should have been investigating this. And they, in fact, have been investigating some of this. But because of our politicized Department of Justice, they shut down investigations. They did not help with these investigations that were looking into different aspects of the Biden family business. The current U.S. attorney looking into it is highly understaffed and is operating out of a very small office that doesn't have the resources necessary. And even though there's a conflict of interest, Merrick Garland is not named special counsel, which is in complete violation of rules there. So what's being investigated is good.
Quick follow-up to both of you. How far back in the president's career does this go? He's been in D.C. almost since Lincoln. A long time. So how far back does this go? Molly?
I was just going to say that there are so many, we have an overclassification problem in this country, particularly, it's not so surprising that you've had Biden, Trump, and Pence all brought up with this classified documents. It happens. The fact that some of these classified documents that Joe Biden is really dates to the Senate has kind of shocked the town. Because whereas these type of information is kind of flowing all the time in the executive branch, you actually kind of have to work hard to mishandle documents when you're in Congress, and some of them do date to his Congress.
Mr. Chairman?
Right now, today, we're going from today all the way back to Burisma. We're trying to focus on that. There's enough information there. I think the American people are going to get a good taste of what the Biden family business is about. And what Molly said is exactly right. The Democrats like to compare to what Trump did. Trump and Kushner, they have legitimate businesses. I know what their businesses are. They own real estate, they own golf courses, they own apartment complexes, they have employees. What's the Biden business? They don't own anything. They don't sell anything. They don't manufacture anything. What is the business?
Being the big guy.
The business is influence peddling. And there's a term for that. It's called being a foreign agent. So one of the things the Department of Justice could have already indicted, it looks to me like it's pretty clear that Hunter Biden and possibly the president's brother were essentially foreign agents, which they weren't registered, and there should be ethics laws that say immediate family members can't be foreign agents for foreign countries. So they don't have a legitimate business, but they were getting paid excessive amounts of money from some of the worst countries in the world. If there's any bipartisan agreement on putting sanctions on certain countries, I guarantee you those countries are where the Biden family was profiting.
Stay on this topic for a little bit. If you can expand on what you've already requested in the way of documents and evidence, please tell us. And if I understand some of the news reports right, the U.S. Treasury, disappointingly, but maybe not surprisingly, is stonewalling a little bit, given the Heisman on the what's called suspicious activity reports.
Yeah.
What's that about, and can you break the law?
Well, I have a banking background, and suspicious activity reports, or SARS, are things hardly no American will ever get. And the Biden family has at least 150, and I believe more, from, it looks like around 13 different banks. Since September the 11th, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee or the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee has had access to these suspicious activities. That would be under President Bush, under President Obama, and under President Trump. When Joe Biden became president, he snuck in right at the very beginning and did what's called a rule change, not an executive order, but a rule change. He changed rules for chairman of those committees couldn't have access to suspicious activity. Now, why would he do that? No, most members of Congress didn't know what a suspicious activity report was at the time, and no member of Congress knew that the Biden family had so many. So he's clearly trying to hide evidence of potential robbery. His family has over 150. I was a director of a bank.
150?
Over 150. When a suspicious activity report is the bank notifying the Treasury Department that we believe our client could have potentially committed a crime. Now, no bank wants to issue those because when you do, you are inviting the bank examiners into the bank. I was a director of a bank for a long time. The last thing you want are the bank examiners in the bank any more than they already are. You're not going to issue one of those on a good customer. You're certainly not going to issue one on the son of the President of the United States or the brother of the Vice President of the United States, unless you're pretty certain potential robbery will occur.
Yeah, I spent a number of years in banking too, so I know exactly what a SARS is. You're right, 150 to one family. I've never heard anything even close to that.
That's probably a record, and I'm being serious. I've talked to...
Not a good record to have either.
not a good record.
My goodness. I had no idea. Molly, there's been a lot of focus, of course, on the famous laptop. And I'm guessing that Chairman Comer, as well as the Judiciary Committee, are going to be digging into that. What are the substantive charges that might come out of that part of the whole scandal?
There's so many different interesting things about the possession of the laptop. First and foremost, I think the fact that when it was discovered, we had big tech and big media conspiring, colluding to suppress open discussion of this, interfering in a U.S. election is a major issue. But the laptop, obviously, for those who have suffered through seeing some of it, there's a lot there. And a lot of it is salacious and not probably relevant to your investigation. But a lot of it just deals with the actual business dealings that Hunter Biden was engaged in over the course of many years. And so it is important that the oversight is being done on this, also because while the FBI had possession of this, they were not apparently sharing it with some of the arms throughout the Justice Department that were doing investigations into the Biden family business. They seem to be protecting the laptop from being open to examination. And so the laptop gets a lot of news because of salacious stuff. But what's really important, and what's important to the American people, is how are U.S. interests compromised by having powerful families in bed with China. We know so much about how the Biden family has made so much money through China. Is that the reason why we are not doing what we should be doing to take them on as the threat that they are? And it's not just the Biden family, by the way. It's other important families in D.C. that make so much money from the communist Chinese government. They're unwilling to do what we need to do in taking them on. Things that never would have happened when we were engaged in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, where it was all hands on deck. We are in a society right now where we have Hollywood and the media and our most powerful politicians in both parties actually working with China and making so much money off China that it's a national security problem. And I'd say first and foremost is the Biden family, which they've been involved for a long time. They've made a ton of money this way, and it's reflected in how Biden has not spoken very softly about China, how he seems to have not been aggressive in countering the threats that they pose, whether economic or military, and no question that voters have every right to know what's going on.
I want to ask the same question to both of you, and this is a very personal question, but I bet it's one that everybody watching here has as well. With the closeness that we already know the Biden family has had with China specifically, has China got the goods on them? Have they got their hand on the lever to exert that influence? And isn't that what this is really all about?
That's what our investigation is all about. And make no mistake, this is an investigation of Joe Biden. And to determine whether or not Joe Biden, first of all, lied to the American people, I think we're going to be all right on that answer. But secondly, is Joe Biden compromised because of the millions of dollars that his family received? Not just the money directly sent to an LLC, which served as a pass-through to Hunter and to Joe Biden, but also to the University of Delaware, the University of Pennsylvania. I mean, Biden, the 4 years he wasn't in office, he drew a salary from an entity that was, by all accounts, funded through China. So when you ask when President Biden met with President Xi several months ago, why did he bring up the origination of COVID-19? Why did they let the balloon fly? Why are they continuing to let China manipulate our currency and get away with secret talks with Russia and trying to be the player world? Is it because he's compromised? And that's what the purpose of this investigation is. That's what's of the utmost importance to our national security to determine whether or not this president's compromised.
Molly, you want to piece of that?
I'll just also say it's not just China. I mean, there was a previous Senate investigation into the Biden family business that did have access to some of these Treasury documents. They showed that the Bidens were receiving money from Ukrainian interests, Russian interests, oligarchs throughout the world. And it's not just that we're not doing what we need to do to take on China. It's also that the Biden family has been intimately involved with Ukrainian interests. Unfortunately, Ukraine has a massive corruption problem. And so some of the focus there relates to China in the sense that how we are waging this war in Ukraine is drawing Russia and China closer together. But it's bigger and broader and on a much more global scale than just China.
Mr. Chairman, so far, you're into this thing pretty deeply, I can tell already. What's maybe the biggest piece or selling pieces of information that maybe the general public isn't aware of that you've already uncovered?
I think, first of all, the thing that struck me is how much money the Bidens got. It's more than what's been previously reported. And the fact that it's pretty clear that Joe Biden was involved. And that's what the Democrats have said. When we won the House, we flipped the House, we went back to Washington for a lame duck session. Jim Jordan did not have a press conference because Jordan was on the other side of it too. We had a press conference announced we were going to formally start this investigation in January when I became chairman and had subpoena powers. And the press said, oh, this is Russian disinformation, there's nothing in the laptop, there's nothing to see here, or whatever. Today, just a few months later, Now the press is acknowledging, just like the Twitter executives did in our first hearing, that the laptop was real, they made a mistake suppressing it. Now Jordan's gonna talk to those 51 intelligence commissioners and let them explain why they signed that letter saying the laptop was Russian disinformation. But the press is now saying, well, yeah, Hunter Biden, he probably did some bad things, but look, he had a drug problem, and Joe Biden wasn't involved. Now, the first part of their explanation is right. The second part, it looks like Joe Biden was very involved, because Joe Biden claims he never met with any of these people. I mean, some of them flew on Air Force Two with Joe Biden when he was vice president.
There are pictures of
There are pictures, there are emails, and we've spoken. We have met with people that were in the room with Joe Biden when these business deals with his son were being involved.
Come on. Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Molly, again, you've acknowledged that you've dug into this thing pretty deeply yourself, and thank you for doing it. What surprises might still await both the chairman of the committee and the rest of us in this investigation to move forward?
I don't know exactly, but I think one thing that's interesting is there's such a broad nature of criminal allegations, and we seem to get an indication months ago through leaks to the media that there were going to begin to be some charges against Hunter Biden. I mean, he's done things that if you or I had done them, we would already be in prison, like on gun charges alone. But they didn't do it before the election, which kind of makes sense because you don't want to meddle. But it would make sense if there was any consistency in our Department of Justice on that. But if they were legitimate and if they weren't corrupt, and if they were consistent in how they did this, not doing things before the election would be understandable. Now we're here months later, we still haven't heard. But I think we might be interested in what it is they're going to do there. And I do think people would be surprised by the breadth of influence peddling that was going on. And just, things that we maybe already know but haven't gotten enough attention. Like I always think about that $80,000 fine that was given from a Red China affiliated person to Hunter Biden, which we learned about because of like divorce paperwork. What are you expecting to get in response, in return for that kind of gift? And that's just like the kind of stuff that would happen to know about. There's so much more that we have.
You mentioned big tech a little bit ago, and I should have followed up probably right there, but let me ask now, both of you. Big tech's role in at least trying to keep the blankets on the bed, at least covered up as long as they could. That's obviously going to be part of the investigation. Can we hold them accountable too?
It's such a massive problem. The role that big tech has is suppressing freedom of speech and freedom of debate, and truly election meddling. There is no question that every American had the right to know what the Biden family business was doing and what it was involved in. And it wasn't just that most members of the media did nothing to investigate it. It's when one brave newspaper, the New York Post, did get the goods on this and began reporting it. There was this concerted effort of conspiracy, of collusion to shut this down, and many people should be held accountable. I don't actually know exactly what that means, but people need to stop giving propaganda press legitimacy. They are actively harming the country. They do not have the right to harm us in this way. And so I think that people who are victims of this should stop giving them any legitimacy whatsoever. Something needs to be done about big tech, and frankly, the typical conservative response is insufficient. Typically, conservatives will say, there's nothing we can do about this destruction of the country because they're a private company. No, they're more like another country. They're more like another government. And they are so powerful, and they have such an outsized effect on the freedom of our elections, on the security of our elections, on our ability to just be free people and debate the truth. Something must be done. I sure hope your colleagues are going to wake up and realize that something really needs to be done there. And then another part of it is that we have all sorts of agencies who are involved in this conspiracy to suppress conservative debate and information. I've had some reporting recently about this Disinformation Inc., It's a global, billionaire-funded operation to say that if you are the New York Times and you lie for years about the Russia collusion hoax, you're good media. And if you expose what the New York Times is doing, well, you can't be trusted. They give that information to advertisers and other people like like search engines, and it ends up being that the New York Times gets to grow and the conservative media is declining. We are in an information war that's being waged by government agencies. They are funding some of these things, and so that's another area that really needs to be taken on if we want to have even any hope of being a free people.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to add anything to this exposing that, I mean, at a minimum, it'd be nice if we knew the truth about big tech and the media's role in covering this up.
That was part of the commitment to America, to hold big tech accountable. There are committees that are supposed to be doing that right now, energy and commerce primarily. They're looking at Section 230 and some of the other things that we've all talked about. I'll tell you what my committee is doing, the House Oversight Committee. We just passed, it was my bill, passed out in committee, the Protecting Speech from the Government Act. Basically, it prevents what the FBI was doing. Right now, the Hatch Act apparently didn't apply to social media activity. But this bill expands the Hatch Act that would prevent and allow us to hold the FBI agents accountable. We didn't know until Elon Musk released the Twitter files that the FBI had a special unit of 50 people at least. They didn't have the authority to do it. They didn't have the funding to do it, but somehow they had 50 employees that did nothing but police social media. And they were policing social media against conservatives. They were censoring conservative speech. But we can't hold, there's a loophole in the law apparently that allowed them to do this. The government has no business in censoring speech, whether it be conservative speech or liberal speech. That's a First Amendment right. That's a violation of the First Amendment. The government shouldn't do that. This bill will make it not only illegal, but allow them to be prosecuted.
I want to be sure and ask you before you get away. We started CPAC yesterday morning with Chairman Schlappman and Chairman Jim Jordan from the Judiciary Committee talking about the investigation that he's taking. So, and knowing the both of you a little bit, and I know that you've separated the turf a little bit. You've got your responsibilities, he has his, and judiciary. How have you divided that up? What should all of us expect from your respective investigations?
Well, Jim's the GOAT. Jim's the LeBron James of the House Republican Conference. And Jim gets more words per minute in than I do. But Jim's focused on the Department of Justice. He's focused on the weaponization of the Department of Justice, the weaponization of the FBI. He's also on the Oversight Committee, so he knows what we're doing with respect to the Biden investigation. Part of the problem with the Biden investigation is overreach by the Department of Justice. There are a lot of questions we have for the Department of Justice as to why has Hunter Biden been able to get away with this. No other American would have gone this long without being indicted. But for whatever reason, the Department of Justice hasn't done anything with Biden. So Jim's focused on that. He's also a key person on the Oversight Committee, focused on the Biden family influence building. So we work together really well. We communicate every day.
Well, thank you for doing it. Let me ask both of you the same question as we wind this down. As I sit here, Mr. Chairman, you're in Congress, I was in Congress, privileged to be there for a little while. Molly, you've observed the voters for a while. So you've got a perspective as well. I know what human nature is. I understand that we are a fallen nature. I get all of that. But I honestly struggle with how any Joe Biden, whoever, would somehow think that this is all okay. That after that many years of, call me naive, call me whatever, I always thought we were supposed to be held to a little higher standard. Not that the rules didn't apply, but in fact, they were more onerous.
But you've already said this, right? Like, this is a man who's been operating in Washington, D.C. for more than half a century. And he's gotten away with it the entire time. It's not just him, it's other people who are involved in this fraudulent activity. Money is very tempting. But that's why it's important, why we have a system of government that has these checks and balances that is supposed to limit corruption, and so hopefully.
Yeah, it's very obvious. Joe Biden's very arrogant. He's very entitled. He thinks that the law does not apply to him, and obviously he thinks that applies to his family as well. One thing I've noticed in 6 years in Congress, I've been in Congress 6 years, it seems like the members get worse, most of the members get worse the longer they stay. One of the greatest things that this Republican Party can do, and I hope we do it, I'm for it, is pass term. We need term.
So I think we're in good hands with Chairman Comer and Chairman Jim Jordan leading this investigation. It's a shame we've got to have one, but I think it's the investigative part is in good hands. I also think it's critically important that we have a media that's willing to tell us the truth and expose the problems that exist out there. So join me in thanking Molly and Chairman Comer. Thank you all for being here. God bless you.
The CRT issue, that's the pandemic we have to worry about. It's in our schools, it's in our government at all levels.
Hopefully you enjoyed
It's in our
that.
corporations,
We'll be talking to you and seeing you soon.